All right, we're live.
Okay, good evening. Today is Monday, November 20th, and this is a regular meeting of the Board of Education. We're happy to welcome our newest member, Mr. Guido, to the board. And could you please all rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance with me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Thank you. As this is our regular meeting for November and it is after the elections, I would ask members of the Board of Education for a nomination for board chairperson.
I'll start that off using the language. I move that the Weston Board of Education nominate Steve Ezzies as board chairperson.
May I have a second? May I have a first? I guess that was the first. I'm sorry, I'm not good at this. Can I have a second, please?
I second, Lisa. It's Sharon.
Thank you. Ms. Saketa, as board clerk, can you do a roll call for the vote, please?
Yeah. Stephen Ezzies.
Aye.
David Felton.
There's not going to be any discussion on this.
I'm sorry. Would you like to just?
Yes.
Would you like to discuss?
Yes. So,
okay, so let's back up just for a minute. So we have first a nomination and a second, and I open it up for discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
Sure.
So I wanted to just comment on Steve's chairmanship in the future, what we'd be potentially looking at. So as a board member that has seen two chair and vice chair elections, and in conferring with folks who are on the board longer than I, it has been past practice, and it has stood the test of time, that generally speaking, the chair is the majority party, and the vice chair is the minority party. And what has happened in the past and is the individual caucus would meet with their members and would ask their members who they felt would be the best vice chair. And I don't know what the Democrats caucused on. I will speak only for the Republicans. The Republicans spoke, and the caucus determined that the vice chair of their choosing was me. So I reached out to Steve, as is practice in the past, and I shared this information with Steve. And Steve let me know that under no circumstance would the Democrats vote for me as vice chair. And he went on to say he has spoken to each member of his caucus, and each member of the caucus, having never spoken to me, would not support me. And really what that speaks to is not about supporting me. It's about a past practice that has been honored because we are a non-political board. And for the first time in history, Steve as chair is essentially putting politics in front of community. And when I asked him about what the reason was, his response to me was he didn't like the way I campaigned. And therefore, I read this as 100% punitive. So I wanted to just get out into the public what has transpired prior to today's meeting, what the Republicans' first choice is for vice chair, and Steve's unwillingness as chair to honor past precedent.
Are there any board members that wish to make a comment at this point or continue this discussion? Okay, at this point, I will ask Ms. Saketti to do the roll call for the vote.
I will continue where I left
Thank you.
off. David Felton,
No.
Sharon Ferraro,
Yes.
Michael Guido,
I'm going to abstain.
Peter Gordon,
Yes.
Chad Hopner,
Yes.
Bernadette Kingsley.
Yes.
With 5 votes, this motion passes.
Well, thank you, everyone. Appreciate that. The next, first of all, Michael, welcome to the board. We look
Thank
forward
you.
to we look forward to you getting very much engaged in our activities. It's going to be a busy next couple of years. The second item on the agenda is a nomination and a vote on the board vice chairman. Can I call for a nomination?
I would like to make a nomination.
Okay, Bernie.
I move that the Weston Board of Education nominate Peter Gordon for the vice chair position. One of the big responsibilities facing the BOE will be the school facilities planning and renovations. And I think with Peter's engineering background and his current work on the facilities committee and as chair of the educational optimization committee, he is uniquely qualified for this board leadership position.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second.
Thank you, Chad. Comments? Jody, would you call a roll?
I have a
Yes.
comment. Peter, well,
Yeah.
Bernie quickly jumped in. Were you calling for a nomination?
Yeah, I did. I called for a nomination and Bernie responded.
I believe Peter and Bernie at the same time.
Are you asking me to roll back the tape?
I'm asking if Peter has any comments.
I have no comments. It was Bernie's turn, so we'll have to continue with our roll call.
Okay, then I shall start. Stephen Ezzies,
Yes.
David Felton,
No.
Sharon Ferraro,
Yes.
Michael Guido,
I'm going to abstain.
Peter Gordon,
Yes.
Chad Hopner,
Yes.
Bernadette Kingsley.
Yes.
With 5 votes, the motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations, Peter. The third item on the agenda is a nomination and a vote on the board secretary. Is there a nomination?
I will nominate Bernie to stay in the position. I don't actually, do I need specific language for this from the board book?
No, that's,
That's
And
fine.
do I-
I nominate Bernadette Kingsley to maintain her position as secretary.
is there a second?
I'll second.
Mhm.
Comment from the board? Seeing
I
none,
think
Jody,
Bernie has done an outstanding job. So thank you, Bernie, for your work on the previous board.
I totally concur with that. Jody, would you roll call, please?
Yes, I will. Stephen Ezzies,
Aye.
David Felton,
No.
Sharon Ferraro,
Yes.
Michael Guido,
I'm going to abstain.
Peter Gordon,
Yes.
Chad Hopner,
Yes.
Bernadette Kingsley.
Yes.
5 votes, motion passes. Thank you.
Congratulations, Bernie. Now you can go back to work for the rest of the evening. Bernie's doing parent-teacher conferences at the school he teaches in Brooklyn, in Bridgeport. Thanks, Bernie. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the October 16th, 2023 Weston Board of Education regular meeting. Are there any changes to the minutes? Do I have a motion to approve? You're on mute, Sharon.
Sorry, I don't have the language in front of me. Peter, do you happen to have the language? I thought you said something about board book earlier.
Yes, I move
I'll
that
grab
the
it.
Weston Board of Education approve the minutes. And I don't have the date in the language, but the minutes under
October 16th, 2023.
October 16, 2023.
Is there a second? Somebody want to second the?
Yeah, I can second.
Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Yep.
Thank you. All those in favor, just say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Michael, I assume you abstained.
I was not here, so yes.
Yeah. Fantastic. Item number 5 is the Student Board of Education representative comments.
The floor is yours, ladies.
Hi, it's Vivian and Gianna. We are back again, and we're so excited to give you updates on what has been happening. I just wanted to first start off with Gianna's still kicked out for some reason.
No, she's right here.
No, I'm here. Oh, she's
Yeah.
back. Okay. Okay, yeah, I should make sure she's back. Okay. So first off, we want to talk about student government fundraisers. We did the Weston pink shirts a month ago for the football game, and we were able to raise more than 600, but we're donating $600 from what we raised to Sloan Memorial Kettering. And then we also were able to raise a little over $1,100. That's going to be donated to person, the fundraiser, which we did through the coin drive, which was through advisories during PACT. And this was like the most money we've ever raised, basically in the span of a little over 1.5 months. So it's really exciting to see how involved our community and the school has been, and like how motivated everyone in advisories has been to like compete to get as much money as they can for donations. Another note, for Veterans Day, we had a ceremony. The chamber singers went and sang at the town hall for the veterans, and it was really good, very exciting, so fun. Also, the American Heroes Club ran a successful lunch and panel discussion where kids were able to like listen to their stories and just kind of like hear about the past and learn more about history. And also during lunch, like a lot of kids were talking to a lot of veterans, and it was really inspirational, just like hearing what they went through and what they've learned through being in the military. I loved that so much. And then afterwards, the panel discussion in the library, which was well attended. There was a lot of kids that left class and went to it and listened. And I got a lot of feedback from those kids saying how inspirational it was to them too. And recently, on November 15th, the National Honor Society inducted new members. There was a lot of kids in our school that were there, which is exciting and shows a really good participation in education at our school. Thank you, Gianna.
Okay, so in addition to all of those wonderful things, we also did a swap shop this week, and basically it was an initiative by the Green Team where kids could donate some clothes, and then you get tokens for the clothes that you donate, and then you can go in the store and you could use those tokens to get more clothes, and then you could also pay to get clothes too. So all those funds are gonna help environmental initiatives around the school, which is super exciting. Moving on to sports, a lot of our fall sports seasons have come to an end. We haven't had many teams go to SWCs or states, we had teams go to SWCs and states, but not many teams won this year, except for the girls swim and dive team, which won for the 10th time this year, which is the first time in school history. So that's really, really cool. Some upcoming events, we have a meeting with WB Mason coming up to help talk about the senior lounge, which is something we're working on revamping, kind of making a lounge that not just few seniors can use, but just everyone in the school can use. And we also have our school spirit week for right before December break, which is when we have X periods, which basically is like meetings for every advisory where kids can do different activities. And then the sophomores in student government are also going to work on decorating the hallways the week right before break. And lastly, we have our counties and red and white stances coming up. So red and whites is for the seniors, and then counties is for the juniors. And that's in January and February. So those are just some things that we're looking forward to. And yeah, that's all we have prepared for you guys today.
I think the word "that's all" is a little bit of an understatement. You've been very busy.
Yeah, we have been great. Yeah, we love it.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, thank you. Any questions from the board? Well, thanks a lot.
I don't have any questions, but I do want to mirror what you said, Steve. Ladies, you've presented a tremendous amount of information, and thank you for sharing that with us. It's really great to see students get so engaged and the student government, and you represented yourselves and your student body nicely tonight. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Have a great night.
You have a great day. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
The next item on the agenda is item number 6, public comment.
We have a problem with public comment because there was never a link to the calendar. In the calendar, there was never a link provided for public comment. So I received emails from a few people, including my wife, who I had to manually forward the link to. So we don't have, there's no link in the calendar invite for public comment. So I would like to offer public, if the link can be fixed, take public comment now, and if more people join later because they're made aware of how to get to it, have more public comment later.
Dan, Jody, is that the case?
Just from a point of clarification from my point, just from a technical standpoint, the link that's on the Board of Ed calendar, David, is that where you're talking about that there's,
yeah,
it's not the Zoom link?
Right. So under link to Zoom webinar, it says TBD. So
I know it's in board book. If you go to that, I see it there. Hold on just one second.
Yes, it is in
Let me see
board
if I
book.
can update the calendar. Just a minute. Give me 1 second. All right, see if I just refreshed it. See if you can see it now. Because I see quite a few people who are attendees here. 1, 2, 3,
Yeah,
4, 5, 6, 7 people who are attendees.
Right. And the vast majority of those people are contacts that I've shared the manual link with. I would say better than half of those, actually. All of them.
Dan, in the past, have they not been attendees and then we just ask them if they'd like to be elevated? Isn't that how we've typically done it on Zoom?
Yeah, so what typically happens is the Zoom link is on the calendar item, and it's the Zoom link. It's the same Zoom link for everybody, attendees and panelists. And then anybody who's an attendee, there's a hand raise function. They raise their hand when we get to public comment, and then we promote them.
So that Zoom link was on the calendar, was it? Or was that what you were talking about, David?
It was not. The Zoom link was not on the calendar. If somebody knew to go into board book, which is not a natural.
Actually, it is. We've been doing that at the request of the Haythorns since last year. We put it in the board book and we put it on the calendar.
Right. What I'm saying is that I don't think it's intuitive that we should just presume that people know the link says TBD to go look in board book.
Is it up?
I thought it was on the calendar.
It's up here right now. I refreshed and I made sure it's there.
Okay, so David, if you want to represent people, please go ahead.
I don't want to represent anybody. I just wanted to say that the link for public comment wasn't available until now. So I think if more people join later during our meeting, we should give them an opportunity at a point later in the meeting to speak. I think that we should let the people obviously who are here now speak, but if more people join later, there should be that
we can do that. We can do that. We can absolutely do that.
Okay.
So let's take public comment now, and then we'll take it again in a couple of points later in the meeting.
So just as a point of clarification for anybody who's currently attending the webinar, there's a little hand raise feature. So if you would like to make public comment, you just click on the raise hand. Jody will then prompt you to promote you to panelist. You just have to click accept. And then it disconnects for a second and reconnects, and you're promoted to panelist, where you can then go forward with your public comment.
Are we ready? Jason Nussbaum, I'm going to promote you to panelist if you would like to speak.
Thanks for that. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, can you please state your name and state your address for us, and you will have 5 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Sure. Jason Nussbaum, 35 Langner Lane, Weston, Connecticut. All set? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Terrific. Thanks. Hey, I just wanted to make sure that the Board of Ed was aware that a formal FOIA request was made to the school regarding an overt anti-Semitic comment made by a school employee in the high school, a guidance counselor, social worker. Sorry, we were initially told when we sent an email to the principal and superintendent that we were not allowed to have any information regarding how an incident regarding an employee was handled. That wasn't completely true, as we later were made aware by an attorney that we could in fact file a FOIA request. The school did respond as they need to legally, acknowledging the receipt of that FOIA request. And that was October 30th. We were told that when they have time to provide the report, they would, and there has been no update. So at this point, for those of you who are not aware of the incident, I can certainly take you through it. For those of you who are aware of the incident, this is an update that the school has yet to provide any information regarding an overt anti-Semitic comment and subsequent mocking of town resident when the anti-Semitic comment was called out online. And we still have no update from the school, which at this point, we are in contact with an attorney to try and force the issue further. This is now FOIA, so as you know, the report must be provided. So any delay or further delay or continued avoidance of the issue is only going to create larger issues. If there is anyone who is not aware of the incident, since I still have some time, I can take you through it. Immediately following the terrorist attack, killing almost 1,400 civilians in Israel, we have a social worker in the high school who posted an incredibly anti-Semitic screed filled with anti-Semitic tropes by a renowned Jew hater named Linda Sarsour. When someone pointed out to this social worker that the commentary was anti-Semitic, it was responded with the laughing emoji, further exacerbating the pain and the mourning that Jews around the world, and particularly here in Weston, are going through. At which point we notified via screenshots the superintendent and the principal, and then you can pick up where I started the story, being told sort of a half truth that we were not allowed to be told what actions were taken. I have been contacted. My wife has been contacted. I know others in town have been contacted regarding this because there is genuine concern that this person is still face-to-face and potentially providing counsel to Jews and non-Jews alike. And since we haven't gotten any kind of update of any kind, either written or verbal, I wanted to make sure the Board of Ed was aware that this is going on right here in our town.
Thank you, Jason. As you know, the board does not respond to public comment. But we take it under advisement.
Great. I was not aware of that, but thank you for letting me know. Appreciate your time.
Jody?
Okay. The next person is Hillary Felton. I will promote you to a panelist. Give me just a moment. Okay, Hillary, you have been promoted to a panelist. Please state your full name and your address, and you will have 5 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thanks, Jody. Hi, this is Hillary Felton. I live at 21 Ridge Road. And yes, I am related to David. My question for the board and for the school district is, given the recent events, I'd like to understand the district's current curriculum on the Holocaust, on anti-Semitism, and the conflicts in the Middle East. I'd also like to understand if the district plans to make changes to this curriculum to provide age-appropriate education on these topics at all the schools. I raised this issue to Ken Cross several years ago, and it went nowhere in light of everything that's happening in the world right now and the increased lack of actual factual information that seems to be permeating the public. And as Jason just pointed out, this hits home here in Weston. I'd like to understand how the school is looking to educate our children on these topics. And I'd particularly like to know if there is a plan to do something in the schools to commemorate Holocaust Remembrance Day in January. It falls very close to Martin Luther King Day, which is widely discussed throughout our schools, and there are age-appropriate conversations that could be happening across the board at all our schools. And I'd just like to understand how that's being addressed and if it's going to be addressed within our schools moving forward.
Thank you, Hillary. Jody? Mute. Jody, you're on mute.
I know I was having trouble with the mouse.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Amy Sanborn, I'm going to promote you to a panelist. And once you are promoted, please state your name and your street address.
Okay.
And you will have 5 minutes to speak.
Okay. Can you guys hear me? I'm a techno troglodyte.
Yes.
Okay. I was on YouTube. I found the Zoom. I would say, yes, I am not someone who goes to the board book. So there was no Zoom, but I got it. So Amy Sanborn, 125 Old Hyde. I want to comment on the process that the board engaged in with the first motion for election of officers. I'm not a member of the RTC, and what I'm going to say has absolutely no bearing on my feelings with respect to Peter Gordon, his qualifications, because it's not about the people, it's about the process. And I think what you all have done tonight is a disservice to the community. I think it is against, and I've lived here for 30 years, although I grew up here. So I won't tell you how many years that is that I've been paying attention to what's going on. And what was done tonight is not, to my knowledge, been done anywhere else where the majority party has not supported the candidate that the caucus of the minority party wanted. And I am very disappointed and I am very concerned. And I find what you did to be grossly inappropriate. And I hope that you will not continue that going forward. And that, as was said, there are 10,000 people in this town. I happen to be on the library board. We also support all 10,000. You support the kids, but it should be apolitical. It should be dispassionate. And I hope you can all figure out a way to work together, put this aside. And I think that the example, if our kids were to watch this, that was set tonight, is very disheartening to me. And it's not an example that I would want my even adult children to see tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amy.
And that is it for public comment from what I can see so far, unless there's anybody else here that would like, oh, wait, hold on just one, no. Yes. No, I don't have anybody else that's raising their hand. Oh, wait, hold on 1 second. I have one. Teresa, would you like to speak? Hold on one moment. I am promoting Teresa to be a panelist to speak. Teresa, would you mind stating your name and your address because your Zoom link only says Teresa's iPad?
Sure. It's Teresa Brasco. I'm at 39 Laurel Lake East. I am a 27-year resident of Weston. I've served in many capacities in this town. I'm incredibly discouraged by the actions that this board took tonight. It shows, the buzzword in our town is cooperation, transparency, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This went totally against that. And it sets a very dangerous tone and a very dangerous precedent for the future of the government in our town. And that's all that I would like to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Teresa.
I do see Amy Sanborn's hand still raised, but she has already spoken. I'm not sure if the hand is still up. Would you like me to promote her to a panelist again? Oh, wait, she just took her hand off.
Yeah, what happens is I have to lower their hands as they speak. It doesn't automatically lower them.
Oh, okay.
So
All right.
I hadn't caught up there in time. Sorry.
That's okay. If that's it, I do see several people here, but I'm assuming that they are just viewers. Nobody has their hands raised.
Steve, how would you like to do this since we're going to be keeping an eye on if people who jump in afterwards?
Well, why don't we just go through another couple of agenda items and we'll take it up one more time to give people time if they haven't been able to log in earlier. So item number 7 is old business. The Western Board of Education policies, regulations, and bylaws, a second read. Lisa?
Thank you, Steve. This is a second read for this policy, and for those that are watching, what we do with the policy subcommittee is we bring forward policies that need tweaking, revising. This particular policy hasn't been revised in, I think it's like 17 years. So it certainly is due for revision because the laws have changed. So it went through the policy subcommittee. It went to the board for a first read. In summary, it's a much more simplified policy when you look at it. Probably the biggest highlights are that it has removed the information about particular tuberculosis tests and such that used to be required back in many years ago when I first started with the district, but are no longer. So we want our policy to reflect the state law. And I want to thank our new nursing supervisor, Kristen Abreu, who was instrumental at kind of reviewing and bringing this forward. Does anyone have any, the second read, the purpose is to see if there's any further discussion or clarification that any of the board members have regarding this policy.
And
so just a quick question. They don't have to have TB tests anymore? Employees don't? Okay. I didn't know. Yeah, I was wondering why it was all kind of like slimmed down. It seemed like a lot was taken out, so I wasn't quite sure. Makes sense.
Other questions or comments? Can I have a motion to approve the Western Board of Education Health 4112.4 health examinations for employees?
I move that the Western Board of Education approve 4112.4 health examinations for employees.
Thank you, Peter. Is there a second?
A second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? See none. Motion motion carries. New business number 8. Class of 2023 statistical report.
Thank you. Yes, traditionally at the November Board of Ed meeting, the Western High School reports out on their Class of 2023 statistical report. So what is that? It's basically 4 components, and we have a great team here that will take us through the components, starting with Assistant Superintendent Tina Henkel, who will talk about the SAT. Then it goes to Principal Megan Canetta. She will talk about our advanced placement outcomes. And then our tag dream team of Meredith Starzyk, our Director of School Counseling, as well as our Randy Green, who is our college and career counselor. This is the first time that we wanted to invite Randy to the board meeting because she is an absolute wealth of information and certainly an integral member of the team. And so we thought we should have been inviting her. So we wanted her here because she, as I said, has a great deal of information, especially about this recent graduating class. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Dr. Henkel.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Lisa. Jody, if you don't mind, if you could just give me access to share my screen. So I will toggle through the pages that correlate to the conversation this evening with the report that we've already provided to you through Board Book. And I will
be able to now.
Great. I'm clicking on sharing screen and it says it's been disabled.
All right, hold on.
Whoop, nope, you gave it to me. Good. It was just needing to refresh, and there we go. Can I have a thumbs up if someone sees great, excellent. So as Lisa mentioned, we're joined this evening with Megan Canetta, the principal of Weston High School, and our esteemed colleagues from the Weston High School, Meredith Starzyk and Randy Green. Our purpose this evening is to provide you with a story regarding the performance and as well as the kind of future journey of our seniors that graduated last year. So we have a variety of different pieces of the conversation that we're going to walk you through. We do have an introduction that talks a little bit around what we're going to be talking specifically about tonight. One piece that Meredith added to the document that you have in front of you is our journey to transition from one platform that we use to track and measure some of this data, which was Naviance, and we are transitioning to a new platform called School Links, and they'll probably talk a little bit about that transition in their presentation. So just to get some background, when I first started, the start of the conversation this evening is just to make sure we have a deeper understanding of the PSAT, the SAT, and the ACT, as well as the AP exam. So the PSAT is a preliminary SAT exam. It is a practice exam that students take in their freshman year. It is a little different than the actual SAT. It's a little shorter. They do have similar formats as far as question types. However, it is a little less challenging than the SAT, and they do consider a low stakes assessment, given the fact that it is a practice test. The scores don't get submitted to colleges at all. There is a slightly different scale as well, and the PSAT does not include an essay if a student opts to complete the essay exam. We'll talk a little bit about the difference between students can complete the SAT more than once. But as far as the SAT snapshot, which is how we are measured against, and when we're looking at rankings or we're looking at accountability, it's that SAT snapshot that we really look at that data when they're juniors. And that's a one-time assessment. They don't get to repeat that. And when they take that assessment, there is no essay component. Also, the SAT, if you're not familiar with that exam, there are two components of that exam. There's an evidence-based reading and writing portion, which ranges between a 200 and 800 scale, as well as the mathematics portion. And when you combine those two data points together, that gives a student an overall score. So what we did this evening, when we were talking about that journey around our students when they've graduated from Weston High School, we tried to give kind of a journey across some of the assessments that they've completed within a cohort model. So at the top portion of the screen here, you'll see that we looked at what our senior class, when they graduated in 2024, so they're no longer with us, what the original journey was when they completed the PSAT when they were freshmen. So that was during the October 2021 assessment. And at that time,
And I just want to clarify, it was not their freshman year, that was their junior year, in the fall of their junior year.
For PSAT?
For PSAT. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Meredith, correct me if I'm wrong. Our sophomores also take it in their 10th grade year, but this is the data for 2023, which was in their fall of their junior year.
So this says October 2021. Correct?
Correct.
The PSAT so they were not.
We provide the PSAT to 10th graders and 11th graders. So we don't give, I just want to be sure we don't give the PSAT to 9th graders. So this is from the class of 2023's junior year, fall of their junior year, 21, 22, and then 22, 23 were their last 2 school years.
Okay, so that average score was, thank you, Megan, 1133. And that same group of students, 178 students, then took the SAT when they were juniors, sometimes multiple times. And this chart here shows that trend over 3 years, and it reflects the most recent score. So a student can take the SAT more than once. In fact, College Board recommends that they do. And in this chart, it provides their highest score based on the number of times that they took it. So you'll see when they were in 2021, their average score was 1317, and the average score in 2023 was 1210. You will probably notice that the number of students that were assessed declined dramatically over the last 3 years. And that was partly because, as you know, that was a COVID year, and students, it was canceled. They didn't have to take the SAT school day exam at that time. And we're getting back to some of that, common assessment testing. We are seeing some variation because there's still, most of the schools are still test optional, but this cohort kind of shows the most highest score that the student has received over the last few years that they've taken it, and that within the 2023 class. We then provided you with a 3-year trend for ACT as well. ACT stands for the American College Testing. It also is another college readiness assessment. It's more focused on content-specific assessments. And we'll talk a little bit about which students are completing the ACTs, but this is not a requirement for graduation or a mandated assessment. And then the final chart down here, we just thought we would, make sure you're on your toes. The 2023 data point here is actually last year's junior class when they took the SAT in the spring. So this is this year's current graduating class in 2024, and that provides you with an average score of 1176. Those data points, that's the SAT school day snapshot. So that's just provided in the spring one time. This is not the highest score that those students may have taken if they repeated the assessment again. That is the data point that's actually used when we're looking at high school rankings. Last year in ELA, Weston was ranked number 2 across the state with their overall SAT scores, and in the DERG. And then also in mathematics, we were tied at level 4 within the DERG. So we tried to provide you with, sometimes it does get confusing because some of the students, were showing the data with the current junior class when they took it, and now who are our seniors. And then most of this cohort data, we're looking at those that have graduated last year to look at their progress over time. And so next, we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about the AP exams that we offer, and Megan's going to talk us through the AP exams. Megan, if you could unmute yourself.
I hovered and didn't click. Okay, so what you can see in front of you is our scores over time on our AP exams with students earning a 3 or higher. And at the bottom there, it talks about the class of 23 and 24. Those were the two classes that took our AP exams last spring over a couple of weeks in May. So in that group of students, we had 60 AP scholars, which means that they had a score of 3 or more on 3 or more tests. We had 32 AP scholars, which means that they had a score of an average score of 3.25 on all of the APs they took and a score of 3 or higher on 4 or more of these exams. That 60 is up a little bit from the year before. And we also had 67 AP scholars with distinction, meaning they scored an average of at least 3.5 on the AP exams, scoring a 3 or higher on 5 or more of these exams. And then we had one AP International Diploma, which is consistent with the year before. We had some shifts. If you go to the next page, Tina, we had some shifts in the AP exams rather, and potentially courses that students elected to take. So not all students who might take an AP course will elect to take the AP exam. So this year we had a few shifts. We had 23 more students take the AP biology exam than we had in the previous year. We had, because of the courses, if you have last year's report, if you access it, because we offer computer science A and computer science principles every other year, that number will always kind of swap, where we had 17 take computer science A. This year we had 17 take computer science principles. Last year, some other areas of note, we dropped the number of students who took the environmental science AP exam. We're down about 28 students. And again, students may select other priorities. It's really hard to know. And we had 15 students take the Spanish language culture exam. So it really depends. We had 11 more students take the AP human geography exam. So we just have some fluctuations from year to year, but overall we remained relatively consistent with 287 students taking the AP exam. And I believe that's up a little bit from 283 last year, just a few more students.
Okay. So I think at this point it's me in the presentation. So I'd like to begin with some background information on the class of 2023. In the summer of 2022, 74 students in the class of 2023 attended Camp College. For those of you who are not aware of this program, Camp College is an opportunity for seniors to get a head start on the college process prior to the school year beginning. So a bunch of those seniors were able to get their Common App started and a bunch of information already ready to go before they actually started their senior year, was great. In the fall of 2022, college representative visits at Weston High School returned to in-person, which was great for us as well. This provided a great opportunity for our students to meet in person with the admissions representatives who most likely would be reading their application. And these visits occur every fall and are available to juniors and seniors. So now returning to the report on page 6, our application statistics for the class of 2023. One of the takeaways I had from this page was the increase in the total number of applications that were processed. We received close to 1,900 applications last fall. And this has been a consistent trend we have noticed over the past few years. Also, the average number of applications per student also increased from 7 last year to the class of 22 and to 10 into the class of 2023. I would also like to take this opportunity to define some of our admission terminology for some of you who may not be aware about the application process. So within the applications process for our students can choose to either apply regular decision, early action, and/or early decision. In the class of 2023, 92% of our students applied early action, which is a non-binding program and students will usually receive a decision in early December. So this means that 92% of our students of that class completed their common application and applied to at least one school by November 15th. Early decision refers to a binding contract between a student and a college. If a student applies early and is accepted, they are bound to attend that institution. With that in mind, students should have fully researched their early decision for overall fit, including financial cost. So in the class of 2023, 75 students applied to a college early decision, which represented 43% of that class. Then moving on to page 7 of the statistical report, categorizes the decisions our students made after receiving their acceptances. While the number of students attending a four-year school remains high, we did have some students make alternative plans, such as attending a technical school, the military, and taking some gap years. Ultimately, where a student matriculates takes into account many factors, some being financial, distance from home, programs, majors, just to name a few, when our students actually choose from all the acceptance they have where they ultimately feel comfortable attending. Lastly, I'd like to touch base upon the part of the report that references acceptances based on selectivity, which is on page 8. Weston High School students continue to receive acceptances to schools that are considered most and highly competitive. If you would like to see a list of these schools, please click on the blue hyperlink for each category in the electronic document or copy of this report for most and highly, and it will tell you the schools that we were referencing in this percentage. These percentages are most impressive when you take into consideration that the average acceptance rate at some of these schools is now at least 10% or less nationally. Each year, we are seeing these colleges' acceptance rates decrease, and our students are still striving and doing really well. So at this point in the presentation, I would like to turn it over to Ms. Green, who can speak to some feedback we received from the students in the class of 2023 before they graduated on the college application progress and their experience.
Great, thank you, Meredith. So we conduct a senior exit survey of all students before they're allowed to participate in our senior internship program. This survey is anonymous, and we make it that way so students feel comfortable providing honest insight into how their college application process unfolded. It gives us a chance. We look so often at our students' acceptances to the most selective schools or highly selective schools, but we want to understand student perception of their ultimate outcomes. So we were really thrilled when we looked at the data and we saw that 82% of students indicated that they were admitted to one of their top choice colleges, particularly because we know that many students in Fairfield County in this area strive and consider top choice schools that are highly selective. So the fact that students perceived their outcomes in a favorable way was great. And then we asked students to evaluate on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being absolutely thrilled, their level of enthusiasm for the school that they would be attending. And as you can see, about a little over 88%, if I did my math right, indicated that they would rate it a 4 or a 5. And what was interesting is we dug into that data a little bit. We saw that even some students who said that they weren't admitted to a top choice school, of the 30 or so students who shared that, ultimately, about half of them ended up ranking the school that they ended up attending with a 4 or a 5. So what that told us was that even though initially maybe they weren't as enthusiastic, or they thought that they were not admitted to a school that was their top choice, they ended up very enthusiastic after revisiting and deciding where they were ultimately going to enroll. They ended up being really enthusiastic about their options. So that was great information for us. We were also really excited when we took a look at where our students were landing. 8 students are pursuing higher education abroad. That includes Canada and the UK and Dublin, Ireland, which was really exciting. We have 1 student who was admitted to the US Air Force Academy Prep School, who will, after successful completion, enroll in the US Air Force Academy, which is very prestigious, and he'll have a free ride to college because of that. We did ask students to share with us the amount of first-year merit scholarship money that they were awarded across the institutions to which they were admitted. Of the students who could recall, I had to do a lot of math on this one, but it was approximately $6.219 million that they were able to share with us that they were awarded across institutions. Some students ended up earning upwards of $275,000 from a number of institutions. We were also looking at, we wanted to understand what was the driving force behind how students were making their decisions about where to enroll. And we were thrilled that 66% of students reported selecting schools based on majors, programs, size, and fit. And then 47% did indicate as one of their top reasons as well. We allowed them to check multiple options, that it was based on prestige. And I think as a counseling department and a school, we talk a lot about that. And Megan has talked a lot about that as we are bringing in Challenge Success, talking about the role that prestige plays. And so it does give us some insight into how our students are thinking about the college process, and it helps inform how we work with them moving forward. And I know that Tina mentioned School Link, so I'll just touch on that really briefly. We did opt to move away from Naviance, as many of our peer high schools are doing. And we, after meeting with School Links at length, we decided as a district to move forward with them. I will say that I can already see, I know that Meredith provided some of the data. We have already processed and submitted 1,822 applications through School Links for this year's graduating class. So we're on trend to probably exceed where we were last year, but it's been working really well. And School Links is also serving us well through advisory. We're using it for career exploration with students. It has a really robust career and self-discovery component to it. And we will be using it. Meredith and I have been through 2 trainings so far, and we have a couple of more scheduled. We're going to be using it to support our senior internship program, as well as a means to track hours and student experience. And because it's a small startup, they've been really great about working with us to customize it to meet the needs of Weston High School. So we've been really happy with how that's gone. I think that's all I've got.
So I think it's a good time to pause and see if any member of the board would like to ask questions. And I would ask that whichever topic it is, that one of the 4 of you respond based on your area of expertise.
Well, I'll start. Just an understanding of, are the students obligated to take the PSATs and then on to the SATs, or is it all discretionary on their part?
So I can speak a little bit to what our process is here at Weston High School. So Weston High School does provide for all sophomores and juniors to take the PSAT. And then obviously the state assessment is the SAT school day for juniors in their spring. And then obviously it's up to seniors and juniors and seniors, they're going to take other testing moving forward. But we do, as a district, currently pay for all sophomores and juniors.
That's in the fall, correct?
In the fall, correct.
But are they obligated to take it?
Highly encouraged is the words that we use because of the wealth of information that they gather from their results and the reports that they get.
And do some choose to opt out and not do it?
We have some students who are absent on that day. I am not sure of their intention of that, but we do have some students who may be absent.
And then when they move on, I'm just statistically interested. So when they move on to their senior year, many schools don't require the SATs. Do they generally submit them regardless? Or if it's not required, do they choose not to do it?
Meredith, you want me to jump in here? Yeah, so currently, 80% of the colleges in the United States are still test optional since COVID. 2/3 of those have announced that they plan to remain test optional for the next application cycle for the class of 2025. In 2021, so the COVID year, so those students, that graduating class, 78% of students through the common application chose to submit test scores nationwide. Last year, only 43% of students submitted test scores. We advise students, we work with them on an individual basis to understand whether or not their test scores will benefit them across institutions. Many of our students choose to submit test scores to some schools and not others. So we work with students. It's a very kind of nuanced decision.
Thanks.
I have a few questions, actually. Sorry, Lisa. Can I jump in?
No, jump in, Mike.
Great, thanks. So many questions on this data. I guess just to pick up where Steve just left off on, and your discussion on sort of the test score submission. What do you think the impact is of that sort of going forward? So when I look at the scores here, I see the scores from 23, from 22, 21, obviously smaller sample size. There's a lot of noise, I think, there. Given that, and sort of maybe throwing that out for a second, how consistent are the 23 and 22 numbers with the scores prior to COVID, right? Are we back to trend? Should we be concerned about sort of where they're moving? I know that you guys have mentioned that, I guess comparatively speaking, at least in the last year or so, if I remember this correctly, if I remember the comment correctly, that, Weston's doing well. Are we seeing those scores sort of uptick over time? Because, of course, given the optionality here, right, with the submissions, that those kids who want to actually, who do well, who want to submit those scores, or who are good test takers, would actually take those, and so the sample size is changed, or the sample is changing. How is that impacting the scores, and where are we today relative to where we were prior to COVID? If anyone can answer that.
I know
or has an idea.
Maybe give some more specifics, but I can say
Sure.
right now, after COVID, the testing world has definitely changed. With the colleges being more test optional. And I even have to say, with the SAT now becoming digital, it's a shorter test. So what does that do too? And I think there's so many changes in the testing world that it is very hard sometimes to compare year to year to year and cohort to cohort. But I think, Randy, I know you're great at giving some examples on some of this.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing happen is, as we think about test submission, right? Not just our scores, but test submission at colleges, the average testing profile has risen dramatically at schools for the exact reason that you're mentioning, right? So I think it was at Colgate, pre-COVID, their average testing profile was high 1300s, and then it was rising into the 1400s, and now it's like 1490 is their average accepted, because only students with the highest scores are choosing to submit them in a test optional world. And that's where we have to really look at a student, because it's not just about, do our students' test scores exceed or fall below the mid 50% range at a specific institution? It's, does that set of test scores strengthen the student's overall profile? The transcript holds the most weight in admissions. I would say more so now. I'm seeing standardized testing being de-emphasized at colleges based on my conversations with schools, based on the feedback that reps are giving us. Some schools, maybe not so much, maybe really large public institutions where it's an easier data point when they're sifting through 80,000 applications. But yeah, you're right. So I think that's where some of our students are opting not to submit scores, because they know to be competitive at some of these schools, their scores need to be that much higher. So they just let their transcript do the talking for them.
If I could just
so a student applies to Colgate. One chooses to submit it because he or she has great SATs. Other chooses not. do you see any equality between the two, that the school can look through either the test taker or the non-test taker and come up with an equivalent decision, not biased by one or the other?
Yeah, and this question comes up all the time, right? How are they making decisions when we exclude this one data point? And actually, our admissions rep from Colgate, her name is Mari Prower, and she's really well versed in the process. And she has said we don't miss test scores at all. We are well equipped to evaluate applicants academically in the absence of test scores. So, in the most basic terms, I'm going to give you like a general overview. Colleges will typically give students something called an academic index when they're evaluating them for admission, and that might hold about 60 to 70% of the weight. So they'll look at the rigor of the classes a student takes, what their grades are, maybe how those courses align with an intended major, if it's a school where a student lists an intended major. And if a student chooses to submit test scores, that will be one of the factors that gets included in their academic index. And if a student chooses not to submit test scores, they will just create that academic index in the absence of the test scores. So that's why we say if we think that those test scores are going to bump you up, submit them, right? If they're not, though, withhold them. Even our rep from UConn was here a couple of weeks ago visiting those college rep visits that Meredith mentioned. And Paul made it very clear to our students. He said, I see more students hurting themselves by feeling like they need to submit test scores. They hear rumors that if you're from Fairfield County, you're expected to submit test scores. And he says, so they feel like they have to. He's like, but if they submit those test scores, I have to consider them. I have to factor them into my academic index. And if it brings it down, the student then might not be as competitive. So that's why he provides a testing range where students should look, he basically says, if you're under a 29 ACT and you're under about a 1310 SAT, probably consider applying without test scores. It might hurt you. And it is different from school to school. I don't want to make a blanket statement. Some schools differ, but for the most part, every school we've spoken with has shared with us that students will be at absolutely no disadvantage if they withhold scores, and that sometimes submitting scores can hurt them.
So the natural extension of that is, how do the universities rate the Weston school system versus the myriad of other school systems that they have students applying from? Is there any information they provide in terms of their view of the quality of our education?
Yeah, I mean, certainly anecdotally, just my relationships with some of these admissions reps I've known for 19 years that have covered Fairfield County for that long. So certainly some of them will share that they understand we're a really rigorous high school. They know that we're a top ranked high school in the state. At a lot of schools, if there's not turnover in the admissions office, that same rep might be assigned to the Connecticut territory year after year after year, and it becomes their job and their responsibility to know our school profile and to understand our student population. So I would say, yes, in some instances, they're very familiar with our school. There might be schools where it's, large public institutions out of state. They may not specifically be aware of our curriculum to that extent. But I also want to, as much as we try to get as much insight as we can from colleges, they're not going to share everything, right, that happens behind the curtain or the conversations behind the curtain. So it would be difficult. I wouldn't necessarily know how, a specific school feels about our curriculum versus Darien or versus, another school in our DERG. That's not information that they would typically share. But like I said, anecdotally, they certainly share with us that they know that we're a highly competitive school with a rigorous curriculum.
Thanks.
Meredith, is this discussed? You meet with the DERG directors of school counseling. And do you have anything to add as far as what their feedback is? I mean, all of these schools that are kind of in the same group with are kind of going through the same thing.
Sure. And I think something I wanted to mention in the report that I really didn't previously was, if you would see from the class of 2023, there was an increase in applications to what the Barron's Guide calls the most competitive colleges. And I think what we're seeing, and Randy can attest this as well, is we see some students pretty much casting a wider net. And I think the common application lends to this because it's very easy, right? They can apply to, one application. I know there's supplements, but they cast a wider net. And I think what we all need to understand is that nationally, the schools that are most competitive, their admissions, their acceptances are decreasing. And so schools that used to accept, 15%, right, of their application pool now accept less than 5%. And so that's something that we are seeing across the dirt, across the nation. And so I know it may be, when you look at our acceptance rates, in these areas, you may wonder, why we are decreasing, but it makes sense, right? So if the most competitive colleges and the highly competitive colleges are decreasing their acceptance rates to something so little, our acceptance rates are going to be going down as well. And the other DERG schools are seeing that as well. And so I think, Randy and I talked about this a little bit too, about the colleges that we're focusing on and why we're focusing on them. And I think sometimes the messaging with that as well. I don't know if you want to expand on that, Randy, a little bit.
Yeah, Meredith and I spoke, and she said for probably like 20 years, she's been reporting on what our acceptance rates are to the most competitive colleges. And I think, we have to be realistic about what's going on. And if we continue to only focus our outcomes on those schools where the top 10 are all admitting under 5% of their students, right? We're speaking about a group of schools that are serving so few students nationally and so few students even in the Weston public schools. And, an interesting piece of data is like only 6% of college students in the United States attend a university that admits less than 25% of their students. When we're focusing on the most competitive schools, we're focusing on colleges that are admitting less than 15%. So I do think, like, culturally speaking, we should be speaking about a broader range of schools that our students are going to. But, we are seeing, so Meredith mentioned that we had the number of students who applied to 10 or more colleges from our school last year. So since the pandemic, the number of students applying to 10 or more colleges nationally has doubled, right? And so through the Common Application, there's been a 32% increase in applications over the last 3 years to colleges across the country. So this is what we call application inflation, right? And so schools are seeing such a huge increase in their applicant pool. Thus, their acceptance rates are plummeting. So some examples, right, would be Northeastern, where their acceptance rate 3 years ago was about 18%. 4 years ago, it was 27%, and it's now 7%, right? So NYU suddenly dropped to an 8% acceptance rate last year with 120,000 applications. Schools that were historically considered more likely schools for our highly, highly competitive kids, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, those schools, University of Chicago with a 5% acceptance rate, Johns Hopkins with a 6% acceptance rate, Duke with a 6% acceptance rate. So we're targeting schools they're no longer highly selective schools, they're highly rejective schools. And I think that as a community, when we're evaluating our data, we should be thinking about what schools we're placing emphasis on, because this is a moving target that is becoming really difficult for anybody to chase.
And as a parent, if I can just add in too, because I'm always fascinated when Randy and Meredith speak about this, because I think we underemphasize the importance sometimes when we're in a family, right? That idea of finding, you talked about finding your major, finding your passion, finding your best fit. And what I'm also learning is through a lot of these webinars that I've been going on as well is really reflecting on what makes you unique more than a test score, right? I know we report on the data, but when you're going through these applications, the students really need to think about what makes them stand out. Right. So they get to highlight some of their aspects of community service or clubs or ways that they feel like they have made an impact in their school community and communities at large. And what I am hearing too from the colleges is that they're really emphasizing more of that part of the application versus just that SAT score per se. And we're not sending those numbers unless, to Randy's point, unless we think it's really going to set them apart from the rest. So spending time on that conversation with our kids is something I know Randy and Meredith is really working hard with the department and with the students to really make sure that they're attending or attaching the right colleges to some of the interests and passions that they see themselves within the next phase. So kudos to all of you. It was great work.
I think that if I may, Randy, I think, someone watching this or listening could be like, oh my goodness, how am I going to get in? We're down to a 4%. What's going to happen? And I feel like almost the stress level go up, which is not what we want to have happen. I had a conversation with a parent who has a student at the high school and a student that just went. And I shared this with you. She came up to me at the last football game, and she basically said that you, Ms. Green, changed her family's life by suggesting a school that was never on their radar. They went to visit this school. It was the absolute perfect fit for this wonderful young man, and they didn't even know about it, but you did. So if you could just take a quick minute to talk to us about how you work and collaborate with our counselors and, make sure that the lists that students put together have those highly selective that they want, but also other opportunities. Like, pretend I have a junior now. I did at Weston High, and she didn't have you, although she did have Meredith Starzik. What do you do for the families?
Well, first I want to say, if people are panicking, we're only talking about this tiny number of schools that represent the most selective schools in the country. So the schools that we're talking about right now, there are only 58 colleges. I counted, there are 58 colleges that last year admitted less than 20% of their applicants. Out of 2,700 colleges, we are talking about 2% of the institutions in the country that fall into this category. So please understand, the average acceptance rate at colleges across the United States is 68%, right? And this is my point, is that, and close to about 80% of schools in the country admit more than 50% of their applicants. So the news is actually very, very, very good for our students. So this is why I think when we stay hyper-focused on this tiny fraction of schools, we're doing our students a disservice, right? We're putting pressure on them to only focus on this minute group of schools where they're not maybe exploring all of the options that could be available to them. So I work collaboratively with the school counseling department. We're very close, and we start meeting with families. We have a big sort of introduction. I first do like a little introductory activity with sophomores, with the counselors in March of sophomore year, but we do a real big introductory presentation, which we have coming up on December 12th. There's a plug for the junior college kickoff. So we have that for all junior families. And then we work and meet individually with families to do their post-secondary planning process. And it's really about trying to get to know the students and also to manage their expectations. And sometimes that gives me a bad reputation. Sometimes families think that, I'm crushing dreams, but really I want students to have the most positive outcome on the back end. And I have to educate families on what the outcomes are at these schools. And I'm digging into the data year after year and talking to admissions reps. And so I really try to understand what a student's interests are. That particular student who Lisa was just talking about, I was scared to mention the school that I thought was going to be the perfect fit for that student because the mom did not want them going that far away. And I was like almost nervous that she was going to throw a stapler at me when I mentioned it, but I'm so happy to hear that he's doing great at college. So we really try to get to know the student and understand what the family's priorities are as well. Is it cost of attendance? Is it a specific academic program? The counselors also know their students so well. They know if their students have had social anxiety, right? Things like that as they've gone through school. So it's also about those qualitative factors that might make a school a good fit. And so we try to have conversations and I think sometimes in Weston, working with families and really getting them to be on board with developing their list of schools with us in our department and not only using outside sources like private college counselors. And I'm not saying that private counselors are a bad thing, but we just don't want families using private counselors in lieu of working with the school because sometimes there are some people who might not be that qualified or might not be as well versed with how a Weston high school student has to perform to gain admission to certain schools. So we really want to work closely with families and communicate. And all of my time in the fall is dedicated to helping seniors with the college application process. Meredith mentioned our Camp College program. 48% of the rising seniors participated last summer in our 3-day college application workshop. They weren't necessarily happy to be there when they first got there, but I think they were very happy once it was over and that they had a completed college application before the school year even started. So I hope, Lisa, that answers kind of a brief overview.
Thank you.
Just a quick comment here. First of all, Randy, thank you. I've been kind of watching from the sidelines ever since you joined the school system, and this year I have a junior, so I'm getting ready for our kickoff in December. But one thing I did want to ask about, excuse me, is I was looking at the standardized test scores, right? And when you're saying so many tests or so many schools are test optional, amongst the chatter and the junior parents, I've noticed that there are a lot more than would ever have been expected before. This is my third child, my sixth in our blended family, and my third in this process, and a lot more than I've heard of before of people who are not opting to take the test at all. So basically, what I'm saying there, the reason why I'm curious as to how you think that how that might affect our test scores going forward is, in the past, the students were told they had to take these tests, and as a result, a lot of parents were signing up for ACT and SAT test prep, and so these kids were test prep, and then by the time they were taking it in school, they had a lot behind them. So are we expecting to see a drop in our ACT, SAT results going forward based upon the fact that a lot of kids are just not taking the test, and so as a result, there's no outside preparation for this? Or what's the expectation moving forward?
Meredith and I talk about this a lot, trying to predict. It's hard to know, right, exactly how things are going to go. But again, anecdotally, I can tell you, I certainly have meetings with juniors who they are pretty firm. They know how they are as a standardized tester, and they've got a strong transcript, and they say, I'm not submitting test scores to college. I'll take the in-school SAT because I have to. And I don't plan to apply, and it takes something off their plate, right? It's a burden lifted, and they feel like they can highlight and work on some of their schoolwork or their activities, and instead of giving up those Saturdays. So I agree with you. I definitely see some students they take the in-school and then they have no intention of really taking it, and parents wonder. They ask me, is it worth the investment for test prep anymore? If my student needs to get such a high test score at the schools that we're looking at to even be competitive, do we think I'm going to have a return on investment? And I don't know, how the student might perform before they take it, but I don't know. Meredith, do you think, just kind of anecdotally, where do you see it going?
It's interesting. This is something we did talk about, right? Like, we have the SAT school day, which is a one sitting for all of our students. They sit there and we make them take the test, right? And there could be prep, there could be no prep. And then we also did our ACT results. And if you look at the report, our ACT results are really high. But those are students choosing to send tests and send scores. So I think what's going to be hard for us for the next couple of years is to figure out how we really analyze this data. Because I don't really know if it really is consistent and standardized, because like you said, there's kids that can sit for an SAT on SAT school day, and they may be interested, they may not be interested, because they know they can just send their transcript and not prep. So I think it is definitely an interesting world that we're in right now. I think it's going to take a couple of years for us to really figure out where it goes, because of that.
Thank you.
I have two questions. I'm a data guy, and we compare ourselves often to other schools in our DERG. So would it be possible to get that type of comparison so that, the numbers look good, right? And our students are certainly moving on to good four-year schools. I understand what you were saying about the acceptance rate percentage going down. When I first saw this, I was thinking this is not good. But when you explain it in the context of you have a lot more applications being submitted, so of course the percentage of acceptance is going to go down. But I think it would be helpful, because we often look at what we're doing in Weston to what schools around us are doing. Is there any way to get some data points that would show what other schools in our DERG are doing as far as the SATs, the students that are opting to take them, and college acceptance. Is that something we could potentially get?
What we can get, David, is the comparison to the DERG on the SAT school day. That is, public data that we can get through the Next Generation Accountability System on EdSite that will be public, that is public currently. So you can look at participation rates, and you can look at the achievement rates for ELA and math based on that college and career readiness scale, which is whether or not they met the benchmark or not, which is what I was reporting out earlier around where we rate or stand within our DERG for ELA and math from last spring. And I know we reported that out during the last board meeting in person. But we ranked number 2 for ELA on that snapshot last spring within the DERG, and number 4 for math.
Okay, then my last question is, since the PSAT is essentially, it's not required, but I think, let me back up. Is the PSAT for the 10th and 11th graders required, or they can opt out?
Meredith, you talked about this before, correct? Did you want to just jump in? 10th and 11th graders for PSATs?
So 10th and 11th
highly
graders,
recommended, right?
It's highly recommended. The Weston School District does pay for all sophomores and juniors to take this test, where other districts actually in our DERG charge families to take this assessment.
If you would say the people that were opting out, Meredith, I mean, I know anecdotally, Megan and I can say, majority of our kids, a clear high majority, show up and take this test. Is that a fair statement?
That is a fair statement, yes.
Okay, so then the basis of my question was, so how come such a smaller percentage of those students, because if you look at the PSAT scores, they're pretty good. But yet kids are opting not to take the SAT. So I'm curious if there's any way you can sort of link those two things together, since they seem to do well, and they opt not to take it when it comes time to actually take the SAT and submit it.
Meredith, does that also with the National Merit Scholarship program?
Well,
too?
so for junior year, yes. So our juniors obviously are, trying to attain the National Merit Scholarship achievement. However, the numbers are also not completely transferable, just so you know. So it's not based on the same scale. So I don't know if that's part of when you're looking at your calculations as well.
And just to clarify, David, there is no opt-out on the school SAT day. All 11th graders, it's a mandated assessment by the state, and they are required to take it. Now, what we're talking about choice is whether or not they choose to send the results to the universities and colleges. And whether or not they choose to retake it, right? Not every student needs to retake it. That's something that they can choose whether or not they can go sit again to improve their score.
Okay, I do remember that now, and I do remember you saying that, Tina, during your presentation a month or so ago. So thanks for clarifying that. Thank you.
I'll jump in with a couple questions if that's okay. So I agree with Michael. It seems like there's a lot of noise in here, and piggybacking on what David was just saying. The reason I say that is because I'm looking at them, trying to make sense of a bunch of different things. Our ACT basically stayed the same. Our SAT had this pretty significant decline. I think there's so many factors the last 3 years. I think to say we don't know, we're gonna have to dig in this data, I think that's probably accurate. The question I get that I come to the most, though, is so the drop in the most competitive colleges, that seems like a fairly significant. From 2021, we go from 194 to 121 last year. And our rate at the highly competitive stayed basically the same, 63%, 65%, 62%. So if the challenge there is that we're getting this sort of application inflation you were describing, where every kid's applying to 10 schools as opposed to 4 or something like that, it would seem like if everyone's applying to more, that would simply mean that yes, they're turning down more application because there's more applications, but there's also more different schools that people are applying to. So I'm not sure why there would be that drop there. I guess this is all just leading to, I don't, like, as one of the 7 board members here, I don't totally know how to make sense of this data because there's a lot here. And it seems, I guess it would just be, I look forward to seeing how this plays out because I'm not totally certain how to make sense of all of it.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the acceptances, I know it can be really confusing when you look at it and it looks like such a steep drop off. Even though students are, applying to more schools, and you're right, we're still talking about, when we look at the most selective schools, we're still talking about just the same finite number of schools, right? It's the same schools that have under a certain acceptance rate.
Yeah.
So across the board, those schools in the last 3 years have become more selective, where some of the schools that fell in that category in previous years had acceptance rates of 20%, 18%, 17%, 16%. Now, so many of them are under 10%. So it's reflective of what we're seeing basically nationally. So our acceptance rates are dropping consistently with sort of what we're seeing at these schools. And we're even seeing schools at some of that were considered highly selective dipping into the most selective pool, out of nowhere. So I think with these schools going test optional, that's another issue. That's another factor in why there's such an uptick in the number of applications. Students who historically were really good at school, but not great test takers, wouldn't have even thrown their name in the ring, right? They wouldn't have even attempted to apply because they would have felt like they had no chance every time they looked at that number. So I think colleges are also getting applicants, a wider pool of applicants that to them feels interesting and compelling and dynamic. And a driving force when schools are accepting 3%, 4%, 5% of their applicants and rejecting 95%, some of the driving forces behind who they're taking are their institutional priorities. We call them IPs in the world of admissions. And these are dictated by the stakeholders at a school, right? The president, the board of directors, the faculty, and they determine what their institutional priorities. Some of those are like long entrenched institutional priorities since the school has been around, but a lot of them change from year to year. And so these are those kind of moving targets that we're not in control of, but a lot of these schools are looking for students, and some things that kind of constitute institutional priorities would be students from geographically diverse areas. So maybe the Northeast is no longer, they have their fill, or socioeconomically diverse students. Students with varying academic interests. So, recruited athletes falls in that range. So a lot of these spots are going to students based on what an institution is prioritizing in a given year. And when they're only admitting about 4 or 5% of their applicants, it gets harder and harder, for a typical brilliant, great student from the Northeast to stand out in the pool. I mean, that's the reality. And that's why I said, we're just talking about a minute number of schools, right? About 2% of schools in the country. But that is why we look at that and it feels like such a steep decline. But to me, knowing the landscape out there, I'm like, we're still doing pretty well. But yeah, it can be confusing when you look at it and you try to understand if kids are applying to more schools and how is, we should be getting acceptances at some of them. I get that.
Well, I guess it's also just like, so if there's more applications by every student, it's the same number of schools. We haven't had a, skyrocketing explosion in population. So you'd think like, ultimately, it's still the same number of students each year who are trying to matriculate to college. So then you'd wonder why there's a drop down. But I mean, I hear your point. It seems like there's a lot of things moving at once.
And it is crazy. In 20 years, in the last 20 years, we actually had an increase in the graduates from high school attending colleges. It increased by 800,000 in the last 20 years. So there actually are like more students going to college and vying for those seats. But again, so many schools will admit a majority of our students without, we're talking about a small group of schools, but there is expected to be a decline in the number of students attending college in about 2 years. There's like supposed to be this population decline. I'm not sure. I don't think we're going to see any changes at the most selective schools like we're talking about. I don't think we're going to see it get less competitive, but yeah.
I certainly don't think test scores paint a complete picture on anything. And yet we should ask some questions about the ACT and the SAT. So what's your interpretation of this, like between 2021 and 2023, this pretty significant drop in the SAT? Of course, to Michael's point, in 2021, you had, a third of the students take it because of that year. So there's a lot of difference there. But then the ACT is basically like shockingly the same, 29.5, 0.3, and 0.1. So what's going on there between the two tests, do we think?
I mean, I can briefly talk to the difference about our results. You have to keep in mind, our results include SAT school day, where all students are required to take the test. Where ACT, we have students who are saying, you know what, I think I really want to send test scores to a college, especially a high performing college, and I'm going to take this AC exam and study for it and prep for it. So that's why I think for us right now, when Randy and I talked about, it's kind of hard for us to compare all this standardized testing results, especially with the way things are. Because I think when you look at the ACT, we have a select group of students, and you can see that number, taking those tests and performing on those tests. But the SAT is always going to be everyone on the SAT school day, whether they send their scores or not. That's going to be part of our cohort data. So that's why I think it's very hard to compare.
Yeah, understood. Okay. Those are my questions. Thanks.
May I ask a question? Are we good? This may be for Tina, and I'll preempt it. I'm going to actually look at the AP classes. And one of my motivations is that we're entering budget season, and I want to make sure that we're right sized, either too many, too few, gap filling, instruction on AP classes, because that's where we started our talk. And I'm not quite there yet to ask a student what motivates them to take an AP class. I have a couple more years. I remember what motivated me, but I think those motivations may have changed over a few decades. So the first question is, what motivates students, and there's a lot of them, to take the AP classes? Is it that they get a GPA boost? Is it that they actually aspire to getting freshman year credit? And it doesn't really apply. For example, if you're a pre-med declared major, you don't get your AP biology class, right? You have to take that as part of your core. Is it that it's just fun? They just go, this environmental sciences is fun, I'm taking this class. And then it'd be good to know how they benefit from their scores, and could we provide more benefits, right, to position them for those benefits. So that's why I took that cut on that. I'm not quite sure who answers that, but I'd like to just take a quick answer on sort of.
I'm sure Megan will probably jump in, but I think first, yes to all, right? I don't think there's one answer or reason why some students are taking AP versus another. I'd like to think that part of it is because they like the content and they're good at it, and it's part of that continuum, especially if they're moving into some of those higher level courses that really relate to maybe a potential career down the road. And I do wonder, Meredith, as part of our transition, and Randy too, around ways that we're engaging students in connecting some of their skills to different options for careers down the road as well. Maybe you could speak a little bit about that too.
Sure. I mean, I also think when we talk about the course selection that our counselors do with our students every February, we talk about their areas of interest, right? But we also talk about challenging themselves appropriately, right? Like, so what areas should we maybe excel in, whether it's an honors or an AP course, and making sure that aligns with our goals and aspirations of where we want to be and what we want to show the colleges. Because obviously colleges would love for us to see us taking honors and AP courses every year and increasing that level. Again, though, they want us to make sure that we're achieving at the level that we should be achieving at the same time. So, you know, we have those conversations with our students. And again, we're aligning it though, too, with the programs and the majors that they may be interested in. So for example, if you're interested in STEM, we'll make sure that you're taking your AP and honors courses in science and math, Project Lead the Way, probably, like, you know, what those areas of interest are. Also though, too, you know, there's that very, you know, that conversation you brought up on the second end, you know, colleges are also, they love to see it for entrance, right, for competitiveness. However, colleges are not taking as many AP courses for credit. Let's face it, they were losing money because all these students were coming to them with 4s and 5s and getting credit, and they were able to pay for freshman year based on the credit that came to them. So that also is part of that conversation. So where they like to see our high school students taking these courses, and obviously, like I said, challenge themselves appropriately. However, the return end also, we have to talk to our students about that as well, because a lot of the institutions that used to take these courses for credit don't as well.
The junior APs are the most popular, correct? Because they actually, are
Yeah,
seen.
and I think too, so some of the schools, right? Schools are test optional now, but a student still has the option to self-report their AP scores on their common application. So if a student knows that they're probably not going to submit SAT or ACTs, they can still show mastery in the subject areas. And there are some schools that are even test flexible. So historically, like NYU was test flexible even before COVID. In lieu of SAT or ACT, they would take 3 AP scores. So some students, so junior year, I think students tend to take the test itself pretty seriously because they know that those scores can be reflected on their college application. One of the challenges with senior year, students might take the course seriously, certainly, but the test, students have to deposit at a college by May 1st. So they already know where they're enrolling May 1st, and they know if that college accepts AP credit or not. And then they sit for the AP exams the following 2 weeks. So there are instances for seniors where they know that they're attending a school that doesn't accept AP credit, and maybe they're not as invested in the AP test at that point. But junior year, I think that they certainly take it pretty seriously.
Are there any courses that we're not offering that we aspire to offer, or other courses that are lightly attended that may not be as popular in the future, or anything in between? Are you starting to contemplate that, Tina, as we enter sort of resource allocation?
Yeah, I'll let Megan chime in for the selection and the program studies.
Yeah, I think we do a nice job of offering an appropriate number of AP courses, especially for the size of our school. We also take into consideration enrollment over time. So you'll see like AP Music Theory is an every other year offering in our program of studies. As I spoke to Computer Science A and Computer Science Principles. So we also recognize that we want those, but we would not necessarily get the enrollment if they were to be an every year offering. And we have a diverse number of AP classes across our content areas. So you can see they range from psychology, where the number of schools often don't offer AP psychology. We do. And then our more traditional, like US government, US history, economics. I think we have a robust slate of AP courses, and they continue to have high enrollment numbers. And we evaluate that every year as well when we look at our enrollment, and then, the predictions of our future enrollment based on courses that students take in their prior years.
I have another quick question actually for Randy. Randy, how are we seeing, you're talking about the most selective schools and those numbers, how are those numbers, the acceptance numbers being affected by ED?
Yeah, so early decision, and again, I know Meredith touched on it, but for those of you who maybe have younger students, early decision is binding. Students apply under a contract that they'll enroll at the school if they're admitted. And so, yeah, we've seen a big uptick in early decision. I think, Sharon, like a lot of the schools that we talk about, and you've been through this process, so I know that we're familiar with already had, we're enrolling large percents of their class through early decision, but it's increased a lot since the pandemic. It was about like an average of like those highly selective schools were enrolling about 30% of their class through early rounds pre-pandemic. Now we're upwards of 50% at many schools. And so these colleges are doing that to kind of offset the panic of where students are ultimately going to enroll if they have multiple acceptances in the regular decision round, right? Because you take those most competitive kids who are casting wider nets and applying to more schools at the most competitive schools. And so they don't know where they're going to enroll. So they're trying to, offset that on the front end by enrolling larger classes through early decision for the schools that offer it. So I think it was Barnard last year enrolled 62% of their incoming class through early decision.
Wow.
UPenn is at 51%. Yeah, I mean, a few years ago, Claremont McKenna was at like 68%. These numbers are crazy. And I think what people don't understand is, okay, so that still means they've got 50% of their class left to give seats out in the regular pool, right? But the regular pool, the applicant pool has quadrupled in size, and they're giving out half their seats. And they use the regular pool to round out their class. So they front load through early decision, and they already know, the demographics and the socioeconomic background of everybody, of half the class who's enrolled. And so they look to diversify more in regular decision. So it gets that much more competitive in regular decision at these highly selective schools. At some schools, it's almost like early decision or bust. Unless you have a hook, we call it a hook. If you're a recruited athlete, if you are what they call like a VIP applicant, the child of somebody, a public figure, a really well-connected legacy. But even in that case, sometimes you still need to apply early decision to get your legacy status. So yeah, there has been a big uptick in early decision at these schools in the last couple of years.
Have you seen schools that weren't early decision in the past now transition over to early decision just so they can do exactly that, lock up a large percentage of the class in the very beginning, and also help to eliminate the gap between accepted and then going, right? Because that's the number that they are all very sensitive to. So they want to make sure that they keep that as small as possible. So are you seeing more schools change over to ED, or are the,
in the most selective group, the schools that had ED have sort of like had it for a long time, right? So, the Harvard, Yale, Stanford, and Princeton have restrictive early action or choice early action, not early decision. The others have had early decision for quite some time. There are other schools, though, that added early decision, like University of Vermont, right? We're seeing public universities, University of Virginia 2 years ago or 3 years ago added early decision for the first time. So even like public institutions, you're seeing are trying to sort of lock students in. University of Southern California added early action for the first time last year. They never had it. They deferred 94% of their early action applicants. Was bananas. I don't even know, it's like, what's the point? But so I think we're seeing the schools in those most selective groups that had ED. We're seeing, I think, some schools at the lower tier are adding early decision, like a little bit less selective. We're seeing them adding early decision to lock students in.
So with that being said, looking at the numbers then as it spreads across. So if a student puts out 10 applications, they have one ED. Clearly, if they've been accepted there, they have to sign. So then they have to rescind those applications. Are those applications still considered to be part of the applicant pool, the number that they're reporting, or do they take that out before they report the number?
They take it out.
Okay. All right.
And also, too, I'd like to add, too, I mean, something for next year, looking ahead, the financial aid now process has changed. And I think that's huge for ED, because now we're having students where they could start applying for financial aid in October 1st, now can't do it till December. So we're asking families to commit to a school where they don't know what their financial contribution is going to be before they actually sign that agreement. So I wonder for next year, it might be very interesting to see if we have any changes in that.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, though. The ED, my understanding of ED was, and I've had to sign a couple of those contracts, is that the one way that you can get out of it is if there's a financial issue and you cannot afford to pay for it. Is that still iffy? All right.
If they tell you in your agreement, you should be going into it knowing that you can financially.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it's scarier just because this year, because colleges may not even be able to give students their financial aid award letter until a month later, 2 months later. And now that student was already expected to withdraw all of their existing applications. So they might not be left with a safety net. But I have had a number of schools tell me that for this year, they will allow students to back out of their ED agreement a little bit later than they typically did until the student has their financial aid award. So the student may not have to withdraw all of their applications until the financial aid award letters are done. But colleges are panicked about this change in financial aid. So they're about it.
All right. Thank you, ladies.
Just one last general question on this, if I could, Steve, really quickly. Just on the driver of the application inflation sort of phenomenon that's going on. Are there any theories, ideas as to as to why that's happening. I'm assuming that that becomes sort of almost like a waterfall effect, right? Where of course, it affects the most competitive, those students that are applying to the most competitive colleges, right? They're applying to a greater number of those competitive colleges, in addition to, let's call them what they would call, let's say, more safety schools, right? The next tier below. And then those students who would be applying to highly competitive colleges would do the same. And then we have this waterfall effect, right? That's going on. So it does impact students more than just those applying to, let's say, these two tiers of schools, right? So what is the driver to that? And as I did some quick math here, it does look like most competitive and the highly competitive, the percent of those applications, so the number of those applications as a percentage of the whole, right, of the total applications, has been falling over the years. So for example, the percent of applications that have gone to highly competitive schools was 25% back in 2021, 14% in 2023. I could do the same math here for most competitive, right? It was 30% in 2021. Now it's 24% in 2023. So not only are we necessarily having, let's say, lower admittance, of course, as a percentage, of course, those are going down. And that calls into question for me the composition of the student body that are actually applying to these tiers, right? And that is, I would imagine you would have, basically, let's say on the most competitive colleges, is the number or the breadth of sort of students that are applying to those colleges, is that shrinking, right? You're getting a lot more applications, but is that just a smaller pool of students applying to more competitive colleges, right? And so then if I read this data correctly, is that impacting the percent admitted? And the reason being is that if 5 of us are applying to a most competitive college, let's say 5 applications, 1 each, and 2 of us got in and we would matriculate, right? Or we would be admitted, then you'd have a 40% admittance rate off of 5 applications. But if now you have, because of this I don't know if it's self-fulfilling prophecy, but I'm very interested in your take on the application inflation phenomenon. But now if those other 4 students are dissuaded, right, from applying to those most competitive schools, and the 1 student is applying to 5, if I'm reading this data correctly, and they get admitted to 2, well, there's only, I guess, there's a winnowing, if you understand, sort of the student body that's actually applying to these schools. So can you talk about sort of what that phenomenon looks like to you, the drivers of that, and whether or not you're seeing any implications for the student body and how the number of students sort of is applying to each one of these tiers?
Sure. I mean, I think just the fact that we saw the sheer volume, the sheer number of applications go up at the most selective schools, I think a wider range of students are applying to them. Not all students are the right academic fit. And there is a mindset, if I cast a wide net, I'm bound to get into one. And that's a really big misconception, right? Because if you're not qualified and you cast a wide net among the most selective schools, their standards don't change. You're increasing your chances of getting more rejections. And I think part of that inflation, that we talked about, that phenomenon, I can speak to some of the things that have impacted that. There's been a huge increase in marketing and targeting students, right, to apply. Even Ivies send kids mail on a daily basis, knowing that we call it recruiting to reject. So they recruit to get more applicants to thus lower their acceptance rate. A lot of them will waive their application fee. Some schools will have no supplemental essay in order to drive the number of applications that they have up. With the rankings, colleges are getting more media attention, right? They're becoming more popular based on the rankings. And the more we hype rankings that are based on kind of manipulated data, those schools, test optional has obviously increased the number. Universal applications like the Common App. Back in 2010, the Common App, 400 colleges were on it. now there's well over 1,000 colleges on it. So students can complete one application and zap it off to as many schools as they feel like it's low risk, right? They don't feel like this is high stakes. Same with the UC application. Students can apply to all 9 UC schools by using one application. And so, I think these are some of the reasons that we're seeing these huge increases in applications from our students and nationally. And the crazy thing is that there's a list, like, as I'm saying, I hate rankings, but there is a list of the highest ranked schools internationally, globally, okay, and what their acceptance rates are. And the craziest thing is that if you look at the top 10, like 5 or 6 of those schools are in the UK, and then 5 or 6 of those schools are in the United States. And the acceptance rates at all of ours are 3, 4, and 5% at the schools that make that list. And in the UK, it's 27%, 23%, 18%, because in the UK, they restrict the number of colleges. You can only apply to 5 colleges in the UK. And students cannot apply to both Cambridge and Oxford. They have to pick, right? So they reduce that internal competition, and appropriate students are applying and being admitted to the most selective schools. So we just have this weird capitalistic kind of, admissions process in the United States where colleges are making a lot of money, getting more applications. And this is kind of how it trickles down. And I don't know if I answered the full part of your question, but.
Yeah. So you're saying it's actually the opposite phenomenon in terms of it's not a winnowing of the number of students that are applying. They're just, it's not a smaller set of students applying to most competitive colleges. You think it's a broadening out?
Yeah, I think it's more students across the board applying to more colleges. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'd like to ask one question. I think, Steve, you and I have once talked about this. Do we track all the Weston graduates who go through all this rigor, like 4 years after they graduate? Is this just an impossible ask, or would it be really interesting to see how their K through 12 experience culminating in portrait of the graduate, all the test scores and all the AP test scores translated to sort of how they did in their chosen collegiate careers, or there's just too many factors to consider once they leave high school? Maybe I'm just throwing that as a future exercise.
Meredith?
Yeah, that's interesting to think about. We do that senior exit survey before the seniors graduate. However, maybe we can look at some of the questions that we ask about their experiences, like tying in portrait of the graduate, tying into some of the other things that we talked about this evening. Also, too, we did talk about maybe alumni tracking, and looking at students, and maybe any possible transfers, and maybe why they transferred. So this is all something that we can think about maybe for future tracking.
I remember, and I'm trying to remember, Meredith, maybe you can refresh my recollection, that there was it was a survey, but it was a data point that was put out. I don't know, it was in Connecticut or whatever, that the big question is how many people finish, how many people actually graduate college. Do you remember, Meredith, when we looked at that, like within 6 years, it was I don't know if it was a state generated or nationally generated document, and everyone was very pleased to see our results with that.
Correct. So that was a document that we did through the National Clearinghouse. It worked in conjunction with Naviance. And so we tracked how many students graduated in 4 years, 5 years, and 6 years after leaving Weston High School. And our number was very, very high, I have to say. It was close to 98% in 4 years with a bachelor's degree. However, since we're moving to schoolings, we probably will have to figure out a new way to try to track that data.
I'm sorry, the data was that specific? Student attends, I'm looking at the list, Dartmouth College, you'll know whether or not that student graduated?
Exactly. So all students are tracked through what's called the National Clearinghouse when they go to college.
Well, doesn't that address Peter's question? Do we know how many?
Yeah, that piece of it, yes.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
moving forward, like I said, we're doing that through Naviance, our previous program. Now we're with Schooling, so we're gonna have to figure out another way to kind of track that data.
Interesting. Are there other questions? This has been terrific. Thank you very much, Randy, Meredith. It's really enlightening, and obviously this is heightened college acceptance season. So I'm sure between what you're going to do in first part of December for juniors and what everyone's just completed on the 1st of November, it's going to be a interesting few months. Thanks.
Thank you.
So before we move on to district updates, Jody, can we just reopen and ask if there are any public comments?
Yes, I do have 5 attendees. If there's anybody who is out there that would like to speak on public comment, would you please raise your hand? There's a little button at the bottom of your screen that you would click on to do so. I do have one person, just one moment. Lynn, I'm going to raise you to a panelist. Could you please state your name and your street address when I do? Okay, Lynn, you should be good to go. You have 5 minutes to speak.
Hi, this is Lynn Kimberly, 3 Broad Street. I'm actually a former board member, and I guess I misread the town website because I thought your meeting was in person. And that's really what my comment is about, that I'm disappointed that you're not meeting in person or in some kind of hybrid fashion, because I don't believe that you're engaging the community. And it's easy to say, oh, well, it's convenient for all of us to be wherever we are. But I really believe it's important, especially that we're teaching children that it's okay to sit at home rather than be in our school. And you all represent, not only the parents, but the voters that don't have children in school. And I don't understand why, when the rest of the town and the boards and the commissions are at least meeting in a hybrid fashion, that you're not doing that. And that's my comment. And I appreciate it. Thank you. And I'm sure you won't respond because you don't do engagement. We only do comment. So thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Jody?
Let's see. That was the only individual.
Okay.
Thank you.
Raise your hand.
Item 9 is district updates. The first is a consent agenda.
Yes, that's correct. We have a rather short agenda, and Dr. Rasmussen, I will turn it over to you to go through it quickly.
Thank you very much. I'll actually start with retirements resignations first. We have a first one is Robert Hudak, our security specialist, who this year was at the high school, previously at the middle school. He been with us for 10 years, and we wish him well as he's moving off to Vermont to spend more time with family. And we have Allison Miner, who is leaving us to take a long-term substitute position in a different district, and we wish her well. And then on to our new hires. We have one new paraeducator named is Jeremy Bujalti. He coming into Hess, coming in with a bachelor's from Southern Connecticut, and also doing a lot of work in mentoring students and also volunteering with the Special Olympics. And also we're bringing on, in terms of 2 building substitutes, one to replace Allison, who moving on. And what I would say, building substitutes provide a valuable resource to our buildings that really kind of continue the learning when students are out. So a short, but also I think very important in terms of the number of people that are transitioning in and out of our district. Thank you.
Questions for Paul? Thanks, Paul. Where are we right now?
Superintendent report.
Your update? Sorry.
Yes. Thank you, Paul. Really quickly, tomorrow, our November
Excuse me
update.
just for one moment. We need a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Oh, we always forget that. Thank you, Jody.
Thank you.
Oh,
my fault. I was moving it along.
No, I move that the Western Board of Education accept the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second, please?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Thanks for that, Jody. Lisa?
Superintendent update. Our November update will go out tomorrow, right, Ms. Sakata? We worked hard to get it out before the Thanksgiving holidays, and I really want to compliment the 4 principals who did an outstanding job kind of synthesizing. There's a lot that goes on here. And so please, I encourage everyone to read through it and to look at it. And there are a lot of links, a great deal of good information in that update. We have spent the last few weeks working on the 2025 budget process under the direction of our esteemed finance director, Phil Cross. We've met with every program, gone through a great deal of information, reviewed things, always kind of keeping in mind those initiatives and how well it aligns with our budget requests. And I want to draw the board's attention to in the on December 4th, there will be a special meeting for our enrollment projections that evening, which is always important moving forward. Sections, tipping points of sections, how everything kind of fits in together to provide our students the very best possible program. Veterans Day was celebrated in the other 3 schools as well. The student reps did an excellent job talking about it, but I did want to give a shout out to the other 3 schools, starting with Hurlbut and the Wall of Heroes bulletin board that Ms. June Smith always organizes. We're so appreciative of her for doing that. And the intermediate school had an amazing assembly. And to be able to have TJ Adams, the PE teacher, talk to the children who served. I'm forgetting where he served. If it was it the Army? Mrs. Falber, yes, it was the Army. To have him talk to the children about that and kind of relating about kindness and serving one's community and the, Caught Being Kind initiative there, really great stuff. And then the middle school, terrific presentation, and Mr. Carlin, who spoke, a former Westernite, you could have heard a pin drop in that gymnasium. I was so proud, and as was Mr. Doak, the way that the students behaved and really engaged with them. And then the really rich program that the high school had. It's oftentimes people say, you have school on Veterans Day? Yeah, we have school on Veterans Day. It's important. And we do things that really are meaningful to our community. The students participated in the ceremony over at Town Hall with that beautiful, first time I went over to see the beautiful monuments, the stones with the plaques. Really, really terrific program. Makes me very proud. Sustainability efforts are continuing, just so you know. I know that that's been a theme and initiative of the board. And I think that in every school, the green teams have been really active, doing a great deal. And I'm sure there's more to come in their updates. And with that, I will turn it over to our Pupil Personnel Services and Special Ed Director, Ms. Edwards, for her update.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you to all families who attended the October parent meeting. We had the opportunity to introduce our new assistant directors, review communication protocols across the schools, and also talk about our transition process between buildings in the district. We also did a little bit of work with gratitude and mindfulness practices, which was just a nice opportunity to engage in that way. Our next parent meeting will be in December. A district-wide communication is probably going to go out right after the Thanksgiving holiday. The tentative date and time for that meeting right now is December 20th at 8:30 in the morning. Just so families know, and I'll explain this in the communication during the October meeting, many families encouraged us to move away from meeting at the same time every month. So this meeting date and time was selected in response to that request. The topic of the December meeting will be navigating the special education process from birth to 3 through post-secondary. So we'll be highlighting some key features at each stage of the process, and also briefly explaining the supports and services that are available within each stage of the process in the Weston Public Schools. This meeting will be recorded, so if there are families who cannot attend, they can view the presentation at a later date. The other update I wanted to share is that on November 10th, we completed the ELC, or our preschool lottery, for the 24-25 school year. Families were notified on November 13th about their status, whether they were accepted or waitlisted for the program. As you all know, the ELC program is designed to meet the needs of identified special education students who are residents of Weston and will be transitioning from birth to 3. We are obligated to begin services on or before a child's 3rd birthday. And the number of classes we need for any given school year is based on the number of anticipated special education students in our 3s and 4s programs. Based on our projected needs, we are anticipating 2 3s classes and 2 4s classes for the upcoming school year. I will say we had a lot of interest in our ELC program, which is great, particularly our 4s program. Following the lottery, we placed 4 applicants for the 3s program on a wait list and 11 applicants for the 4s program. We'll certainly let families know of any openings between now and the start of the school year. And of course, we look forward to welcoming those families who were accepted into the program to Hurlbut in August. That's my update.
Thank you. Finance? Mr. Cross?
There isn't an update for this meeting.
Thank you. At this point, before you continue with the agenda, Mr. Aziz, can I please excuse the principals? They have to get up very early in the morning. So thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. We can move on to committee reports, Communications Committee, David.
Nothing really major to report on. We're definitely at an impasse on how to improve communication, and we will continue to work through that.
Cabe.
I think that's Bernie. Is it, or is it Bernie?
Oh, that's Bernie. I'm sorry. Yeah. CES, David.
So I think Lisa and Steve, you probably got the invite. There's that legislative breakfast again. I believe it's in December. I think the 3 of, I know I went last year. I know you went, Lisa. I believe you were there.
Yeah, I went with you. Yeah.
It's really worthwhile. So I mean, it's all the other, that's December. So I'm definitely going to go, and if you guys can go as well, I think we enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's very informative.
Yeah.
Well, just to that point, there is the new member, I guess it's CABE conference on December 6th, where the invitation was sent around to everyone. I know Sharon and Bernie went last time. I don't know, Sharon, if you want to just address that quickly.
I actually found it to be really beneficial. It taught me, I mean, this is the first board that I'd ever served on. So it certainly taught me how boards operate versus how, I thought they should. So I found it to be extremely helpful. It's a great opportunity to network with other people who are on boards of education throughout the state. You get to meet other people and you can talk to them about what they're experiencing. But the one thing I wanted to point out, Steve, is that it's not just for new board members. There's a section that's for new board members, but then there's also the other section for members who have been on the board for a while and how our roles grow and how to address them going forward as well. So I think it might be beneficial for as many as possible to go. It was a full day, but especially both Bernie and I found it to be very worthwhile.
Thanks. Curriculum Committee.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Bernie asked me to, since she can't attend tonight because of the parent teacher. The last curriculum committee was jam-packed. Tina and many others, full team, took us through how technology is being leveraged in the classroom for learning. Let me make a quick distinction here. We're not talking technology about like cell phones and should they be brought to school and social media and all the sort of things that you're seeing in the headlines, in large part because of, New York Times op-eds, blah, blah, blah. This is about technology in the classroom being leveraged to teach stuff. And it was a very informative conversation. They gave us a bunch of frameworks, like 5 different frameworks actually about how to evaluate it, which was cool. It was a good deep dive to see all that. And we're going to do more coming up for WIS, and also for, each school gets a section. So thank you for the walkthrough. I'll say that in the large public meeting as well. It was very informative and useful. And I think the takeaway was many good things and more to come. So it deserves more than that very quick summary I just gave, but anyone who wants to watch the footage, it's out there. It's good. Thanks.
Thanks. The next is the Educational Optimization Committee. We're going to formalize that committee. And that committee will be, a standing committee of the Board of Education. There are special committees and standing committees, and I think this warrants the amount of work that it's going to take and the interest in the community. It'll be a standing committee, and Peter will be the chair. Next is Finance and Operations. We didn't meet this month. Negotiations Committee. There are no negotiations going on. And the Policy Committee also, there was really nothing to report. And Western Educational Foundation, that's you, Sharon, I believe.
Yeah, they just this last weekend they had their Harlem Wizards game, and from what I could see online, I wasn't able to attend it myself. I know there's a lot of buzz leading up to it, but it seems as if it was another huge success, and we thank our teachers for supporting the Western Education Foundation and creating the team to take on the Harlem Wizards.
No one got hurt.
No one got hurt. That's always a win.
Plus.
Yeah, but it's just an exciting and fun event that they've been doing for the last few years, and I know that it takes a lot of work for the Western Education Foundation to put it on, and I appreciate all the work that they've done to put on the event and raise the money that they raise to help the schools out as they do. So that's it.
Thanks. So the next, you can see on the schedule, there's a special meeting that Lisa spoke about on the 4th to discuss enrollment. And then our next regular Board of Education meeting will be on the 18th of December at 6 o'clock, and that meeting will be remote.
Steve, if I may, just one quick plug also for future meetings at the Curriculum Committee. I encourage anyone on the call and in the public to attend our Curriculum Subcommittee meeting. Some of the questions and concerns at the public level will be addressed at that subcommittee meeting, where we do look at, as Chad mentioned, curriculum integration K through 12, but we also will be talking about the standards-based instruction for the new social studies curriculum, which will address some of the historical events at each grade level and where we're moving towards within that revision. So while I have everyone's attention, I just wanted to let you know the next one is in December.
Yeah, to that point, thanks, Tina, for that. To that point, all the committee meetings are public meetings. And anyone from the public can participate. And so they're all on the calendar. All the login information is there, and they are open to the public.
They are also recorded as well and posted, so you can always watch them back after as well.
That's correct. Thank you. Is there anything else that we should be talking about?
Just real briefly, I wanted to make sure it's on our next agenda for December and everything that we need to do to lead up to it. I think it's really important that the district recognize Holocaust Remembrance Day. That is Saturday, January 27th. It doesn't have to be at the moment anything more special than what Dan Doak does in the middle school, which is a moment of silence. I'd like to see more, but I'd like to make sure that this is something that the Board of Ed and whoever else has to sign off on it, so to speak. We have something in place prior to this coming Holocaust Remembrance Day, which is Saturday, January 27th.
Yes, I took note of that when it was brought up. I quickly looked it up, and I have a note on my calendar, David.
Okay.
I'll be talking to the principals and Dr. Ankle. Thank you.
Terrific. Well, again, Michael, welcome. Glad you're here. Hope everyone has a great Thanksgiving, and can I have a motion to adjourn?
I move that the Western Board of Education adjourn the November 20th, 2023 meeting at 8:19 p.m.
Thank you very much, Peter. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Happy